Recording in progress.
No, Zoom, not the cloud, the computer, record to the computer. All right, we got that. All right, 2 recorders, redundancy is the key to success in podcasting. Anyway, welcome back, everybody, to The Broken Brain. It's me, Dwight, your host, here to be with you again through the intersection of psychology, culture, and art, particularly art in this case. And we aren't going to talk about something that's very exciting. There we go. We'll decide if I keep that little turn of phrase. But speaking of turn of phrase, as you know, I love to highlight authors, creators, and people who have a story to tell. So we're going to be talking today to Bill Combs, who is the author of the novel The Quantum Gate. In the statement I have, it says that it is a paranormal thriller that is a blend of the Celestine Prophecy and the Da Vinci Code. That is, in my reading experience, quite accurate. I wanted to also throw out a couple of things it reminded me of. So as I'm reading it, it reminded me of an Indiana Jones story with a blend of academic and adventure. It reminded me also of the movie Stargate. Any of you out there remember that one? I know there was a TV show also with MacGyver in it. But also there was I don't know how short-lived, there were these made-for-TV movies with Noah Wyle called The Librarians. It reminded me of that too. The Starless Sea, which is Aaron Morgenstein's second novel following up after The Night Circus. It reminded me of that one as well as The Haunted Library, but it does more in a story narrative form than her writing is much more abstract, beautiful, but kind of like, okay, lots of, meandering around and learning things in a different way. I'm not trying to, sorry, don't come at me, Morgan Steiners out there. The other one thing I wanted to mention is this story also made me think, if you go back to the TV show Doctor Who and pick some of the best written episodes and say, where would the Doctor show up? What would be going on? This is like a story kind of like that as well. So that is a whirlwind of things that I was reminded of while I was reading your book. But so, Bill, thanks for being here. Welcome to The Broken Brain.
Thank you so much, Dwight. I really appreciate the invitation.
Well, let's get into it. Let me have you give everybody, feel free also, tell people a little bit about who you are and how you came to write and what made you want to tell this story.
Well, I mean, by day, I'm mostly just your typical IT nerd. I've been working in the IT field for decades, but I also started very young, reading and just getting fascinated by philosophy, metaphysics, parapsychology, and I read a whole bunch of different things. And over the years, as a child, my imagination would kind of run away with me, and I would create these stories in my head. One of the stories, though it's evolved greatly since my 15-year-old days, but was this whole idea of the Hall of Records that was mentioned in Edgar Cayce's readings back in the 30s.
I had a question about that. Yeah, if this is something Edgar Cayce factors in to the story, which this is perfect for me. I'm a sucker for it. I think Edgar Cayce is a fascinating person, but so this was a thing that he.
This is a real thing.
A real thing that he, or at least a thing that he really talked about. Yeah.
It's a real thing that he talked about. And one of the things that I've done, because I spent so many years studying all these different ideas, is I can blend real, new age metaphysical concepts into my stories and then, take my own unique blend on how they're going to go. So that's what I did. And I basically, about 2 years ago, I was like, I enjoyed my job, but I wanted to do something more creative. And so, I wrote a little book, first of all, called sort of a nonfiction treatise of basically my overall philosophy. But then I wanted to start writing some fiction, because fiction to me, storytelling in general, is the way to really convey ideas. And people don't tend to give it, a lot of thought. They just kind of let it just sit with them. And that's just a wonderful thing to have that happen. Mm-hmm. So I took, my idea, my stories from my childhood, and then just had some fun with it and created something, which is a true, a mashup of so many different ideas and things that I've experienced. I'm a big fan of all of those things. I'm actually thinking about maybe I should put Doctor Who in one of my novels.
Yeah, have them show up.
Have them show up, right?
Boy, you gotta, roll the dice and see which one, which iteration you pick, or do your.
That's right, exactly.
Watch out for that copyright, Dr. Y, maybe, or Professor Y.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, but that's. The reason that, it reminded me of that too is that there's a world building aspect to this, which there's a lot of things that I think draw me in. And with this one, you touch on Edgar Cayce, you touch on, and by the way, stop me if I say anything that's whatever you want to say, you can say, but I'm endeavoring to leave spoilers out of what I say. But, the Atlantis, ancient Egypt, there's a lot of things that come into that. Once again, I'm a sucker for those things. I find also that fiction is, as you put it, it's a powerful way to convey multiple messages, both the ones that you intend as an author and then the ones that people will project. And that's one of the things that's great about it is we get a little out of our own head, our own life, and we experience the emotions and thoughts of this story that we would never experience in real life, but we get to experiment with it. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
One of the things about this, so you mentioned this Hall of Records, and there's a question. It seems like we exist in a world, and I was curious: is this a world where a lot of people sort of like believe in this, or this is the question: is a lot of people, they don't believe the protagonist's ideas about it, but it's a question of, it seems like there are people who, under the surface of society, great people who are like, yeah, this is real, and we'd like to find it because the knowledge and the power that it would give, right?
Yeah, and actually that kind of obviously the groups and ideas that were in the novel were a little bit different, but there have been people who have, relatively wealthy people who have funded expeditions to seek for the Hall of Records based on the Cayce readings back in the 90s. And so these are all things that happen in our world. So my universe and this universe are very similar. There's a little bit of differences, but for the most part, they're very similar. And the way I view creating a universe was that I want to create a universe that is like a tapestry where you have two dimensions, time and space. So any place in that tapestry, I could shine a lens and write a story about that. And so the Quantum Gate is my first one, but I've got many short stories that kind of tie into it. The sequel for the Quantum Gate is going to be out in a month or so. And then I've got some other novels and some series that are all going to be independent, standalone, but all connect together because there's just this overarching history of this universe that is going to kind of play into all of them.
Wow. One of the things that, and we'll get into, I would consider this at least 2, maybe 3 protagonist story. You have a core team that forms. I know that we would say, and you can say who's, the main. Obviously, we've got Ethan and his daughter Sophie. Very quick.
Yeah, those are the 2 main ones.
Yeah, exactly. And they have team mates. One in particular, maybe who they meet along the way. This adventure. Some who are helpful, some who aren't, some who think they're helpful, some who have their own goals. Right.
Right.
And one of the things that I think to me is a major thrust of this story is the idea of not only knowledge, but acceptance of self. That theme seems to come up. There's a quote that if I find it here, from one of the characters at one point. It says, "The hall only opens to those who know themselves." Mm-hmm. There's a lot of emphasis on Sophie and her father knowing each other and seeing
getting past all of that years of estrangement between them.
Yes. In fact, Sophie receives some mystical source advice at one point that says, you don't have to forgive your father, not yet. You have to see him, though. For who he is, and that kind of a thing, which I really like, because in my other life outside podcasting, working with mental health and working with trauma and things like that, that is one I think we have an overemphasis sometimes on the idea of here's what you do with what you see. You should forgive. You should do this. You should do that. And the idea of just, no, you have to see. I don't know. I found that fascinating, the idea of how knowing oneself is so important to so many characters. And I wonder if you could talk a little about that.
There's a little know thyself is a huge axiom in philosophy and metaphysics. And I wanted it to be in there, not in a preachy way, but in a way that was kind of made sense in the real world.
Yeah. And I think it showcases well for me as a reader, a consumer of fiction, I think about there's certain things that pull me in, and if they're not doing well, they push me out or take me out of it. And one of them is, this is one that it's woven in a way that you can't miss it, but also it makes a lot of sense in the story. Does that make sense? Right. And I think that's very well done.
Right. Thank you.
One thing too that is sometimes hard is you have, let's say, a character who doesn't believe in this, and then they do because of things that they see or hear or believe. I feel like that can be a difficult thing to pull off. Yep. Certainly people, I think sometimes though people err on the side of, well, I want to take a while to get there, and, they're not going to believe right away, and they're going to be skeptical. And then next thing you know, you've got somebody who's, been abducted by aliens who still doesn't believe in aliens or whatever. Right. And that kind of pisses me off. Or at least I could totally see that trap. I feel that it seemed like it was important to say, let's not waste time with convincing Sophie or something that, this world exists for like half the book. You got right into it.
Yeah. I did this is like the fifth revision, the version you're reading.
Yeah.
Some of the earlier revisions, I did drag it out too much. And for example, the whole knowledge of her mother didn't even come out until the second half of the book. And so what I ended up doing was that last revision, I was like, because this is what some authors do, is I sat down and just closed my eyes and had conversations with the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes you just need to listen to what they're thinking. And I realized that, there's no way that this would have been a secret that Ethan would have known and that he would tell his daughter, especially if she was getting ready to journey with him to someplace dangerous. And so I rewrote that whole part of that book just to basically reflect that. And it made Sophie's journey from skeptic to reluctant believer a lot easier.
Yeah, and it really hit me because one of the things that happens in relationships is that when we have a connection to someone, it's very rarely all one way or the other, which is another trap in a storytelling way that I think is easy to fall into, which is like, I hate you, I love you now. And it's like, okay,
right.
What happened in the middle? Or,
right.
And when you look at it, this is an example that I, just from my own, I love the story A Christmas Carol. Yep. And I think when you read it, it's done, and in a few iterations, it's well done. But most movies miss this, which is that Ebenezer Scrooge at the beginning is not a just awful, terrible, like he does terrible things, he acts terrible. But very soon in the story, you start to see roots of like, well, there's a hurt little boy inside here, and we get empathy for him right away. Whereas in the movies, it's more fun to have him just stumbling around being like, I hate everyone all the time, and I'm terrible. And then, now I'm great. And that's
and that was the role of, and I'm not going to say much more than it was the role of Lucas Martel in that story.
Yeah.
Was to be that. Yeah.
And with Sophie, I didn't ever feel that she changed her personality. It seemed like she had felt torn at the beginning, and there was maybe a part of her, would you say, that wanted to, I mean, I don't know if wanted to believe is the right term, but at least wanted to embrace her father and her father's world, her parents.
Yeah, she wanted to, but she was a classically trained astrophysicist, and she was so grounded that it took a bit. But when you see things that are just fantastical and not possible, after you get through the initial, oh crap, what just happened, you kind of have to at least acknowledge the fact that there must be more to the universe than you thought.
Do you find like allegories for that in real life, where we say, obviously, most of us aren't going to see a mystical world unfold itself that involves all these things, obviously, but I'm curious about, do you see representation of that where we're able to see maybe a little more outside the confines of our own, maybe expectations, boundaries? What do you think?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I see it. I've seen it in people over the years, and even myself. Just when you, especially if you're a regular meditator, you can have some really interesting experiences that can change you. That can definitely change you.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a lot of people on who have talked about meditation, or once again exploring the self, There's different ways people break that down nowadays when it comes to like internal parts, emotional parts work, they call it in therapy, where you're kind of having dialogues with yourself.
Yep.
And to me, there's a real sciencey aspect because you can study the results of it, at least with people. But there's also kind of a philosophical, metaphysical part where if I'm talking to this little part of me that feels this way, I mean, what is that? That's not a straightforward sort of like, it doesn't feel real grounded if we've grown up thinking logically, yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
So you find that there is an element of the mystical or the unexpected in real life. And I wonder that probably carries over into how you structure the stories. Yeah.
Yep.
I'd like to ask a little bit about how you have you mentioned a dialogue with the characters. One of the things I like about this story too is that people do talk. It makes me feel, they may say like interesting, unexpected things, but they talk like people. Mm-hmm. Another I don't know why I always mention pet peeves, but a pet peeve of mine is also when people in these types of stories will be like, I got to tell you something. There's no time, but I just need to tell you it'll take 2 seconds. Yeah, no, but there's no time. But there's like, and by the time they have this exchange and then, okay, fine, someone gets shot or they just never get to it for, days. And it's like, just say it, it's like, and I like that while there is this air of mystery, once you get to a person who has the answer, they say, yeah, this. And it's like, oh, good. Yeah, we got there. And they talk like a person.
Yeah, I mean, that's to me, that's frustrating to me as well. And I kind of, when you kind of lead somebody with breadcrumbs up to a certain point, you don't want to sit there and just decide, oops, not yet. It's just not.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. How did you approach that balance? Because once again, they still do things that are interesting and not always what you'd expect them to do or say, but it still makes sense.
Well, not perfectly. I had some friends review the thing, and they pointed out places where I didn't do that. Did a good job there. But overall, when I got to it, I always kind of put myself in the, when I'm reading it, put myself in the position of both the reader and the character. And, as I'm kind of a very detail-oriented guy, being an IT guy, so it's very easy for me to remember things. And if I've seen a trail of breadcrumbs, and I've for some reason decided not to go ahead and reward, I'm like, no, I can't do that. I gotta provide something to reward the reader with an emotional, closure on that thing.
That's one of the reasons I'm so glad that you did that with Maria, with Sophie and her mother. I'm so glad you when you say that you changed to introduce that earlier, because that was one of my favorite parts.
Yes,
that exchange with. I don't know if I can say. I think it's pretty right up front what we discover the Maria's status in life, if I can say.
Right. Yeah. You could say she was right away. She died years ago, and Sophie was raised by Ethan for the most part, if you could call it that, for the last 16, 17 years.
Yeah. And that leads me, one of the things about knowing oneself, that reminds me, I'm going to read the quote. If I can find it, I highlighted a lot of quotes, so it's in my Goodreads here. But I won't say who it's about. You can if you want. Okay. But once again, it's pretty early on where a character says about another character, I thought that I'm going to use a different pronoun. You can, so I don't give it away. I thought they betrayed us, but they actually fulfilled their destiny.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they weren't betraying us. They were fulfilling their role.
Their role, yeah.
Pronouns in that sentence. So anyway, I was curious about that, the idea of, people not always seeing from the outside, like, oh, here's why you're doing this. Here's, you have reasons. You're not just doing something because you're nuts.
Yeah. One of the things that I personally in my own life is I try to really be careful of biases and assuming certain behaviors are because of certain reasons. And we're all subjected to those things. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to show in here that while some of the actions that were taken by some of the characters, would definitely cause other characters to react, there was a reason for that. And I wanted to have some closure on that, especially all of the Maria storylines there that because there's a lot of them. For a character who's dead at the very beginning of the novel, she has a big role to play in the story.
Mm-hmm. And there's also a lot of nuance when you get these powerful secret societies that are involved in either trying, you've got kind of the classic. This was cool to me. It started out with the classic, here's the good guys, here's the bad guys. We're trying to protect the Hall of Records. We're trying to get it.
Right.
And because almost a Jedi Sith or whatever, that there's this kind of, once again, I could launch into a flurry of examples. That's how my brain works. But the thing that I liked about that was you got into the nuance of, is this group all good? Is this other group all bad? And or are they bad in the way we expect? Or are they good in the way we expect? And I liked that kind of a nuanced look at the way the world works. Right.
Because that's for the very reason, because I'm not a big fan of absolutes. Mm-hmm. There's always a lot of gray. And so even with something as you would think as obvious as, bad guys and good guys, there's always gray in there, and what motivates them and why they're motivated a certain way. And I clearly was able to show, flaws and, the halos for both groups.
There seems to be one of the things that another theme that stood out to me is the idea of control, like controlling not just the resource that they're chasing, but controlling people, controlling the world, controlling outcomes, versus an approach that's more trusting and trusting that if there is something that's good for the world, maybe the world deserves it or deserves to make some of their own choices that we don't control. That yielding of control. I was wondering if that was something that you were trying to put in there purposely. It
was definitely in there for a reason. It was, one of the things that we wrestle with over the course of all history is this idea of control, and whether we are controlling ourselves or whether we're being controlled by, other forces, whatever it is. Control is a very common theme, and I wanted to take that idea and say, well, what if this were the case about that, and how would that feel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I liked how one of the characters who seems to be the most obsessed with control, you gave a backstory. You gave, the idea that. People who are hurt are hurting others are often traumatized on their own.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Was that an important aspect to give people's motivations?
It was. I mean, it was. Even if you look at Egyptian mythology, some of even the evil gods there always had a trauma in the past that kind of turned them that direction. Mm-hmm. And so, I believe hurt people. So I wanted to show that human side, that human vulnerability in that character.
Mm-hmm. There's another quote, if I can, that I really liked was this one, and I won't say who it's about once again, but it's here we go. A character who's lost in thoughts and torn and those kinds of things during a time of travel. And it says, she didn't have to have all the answers tonight. For now, she would ride. And got me thinking of this idea of being in motion, even while not knowing the destination fully yet. Right?
Yeah. Yep.
What role does that play for the story and the characters to be like, we got to be moving in order to get somewhere?
Well, from a practical perspective, as a thriller, it was just trying to keep the action moving, but it was also designed to, in some ways, it was that sense of urgency. So, you don't, otherwise, if it's no urgency, they can kind of sit around and they can plan forever. And some characters are prone to plan forever. And so the idea of motion in various aspects was just designed to keep things moving, literally.
Yeah. I really like that all these characters, they're tough, but they're smart. And being smart, it's another thing I'm a sucker for, is a story where problems are solved through being smart. I think that's a great message all in itself to people who are going to read. But yeah, I was curious about that and the ways that you conveyed. How did you decide to do? What were the ways? Yeah, that you picked to say, here, I got to show that there's intelligence, that there's also wisdom here, and that without that, ultimately the adventure doesn't work out okay. In other words, if they're not smart.
Right. Yeah, I mean the intelligence piece was something that because I was always a fan of quantum physics and astrophysics, I decided to make my two protagonists those things, and as they kind of roll through things, they're who they are, their intelligence is irrelevant. Who they really are was what the life they lived through the loss of Maria, through the estrangement between themselves. All of that is what really shaped them. And that was one of their biggest tools to, I think, be successful later on, was that alone. The intelligence just helped them in the little, some key areas, and it made them, I think, more open to, which I kind of like doing, was kind of combining the idea of the mystical with science, and looking at them as the same coin but just opposite sides. And so they were great for that.
Yeah, like how would a smart scientist engage with something?
Right.
Yeah, because I think in oftentimes we see someone who embraces it's like a this versus that, and you're trying to this is a world where they can coexist.
They can coexist, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
And with quantum physics, because it's such an interesting science with a lot of different possibilities, it was a perfect component to put in there to make that middle ground between the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think the idea of independence of thought, of trying to embrace, I don't have to embrace one of these organizations or hate the other completely.
Right.
And ultimately, I think I can say this. Tell me if I should edit it. Ultimately, not only being smart, but embracing the idea of being willing to fight for something you believe in, and the idea of saying, I don't have to accept what's right before me, and that independence of thought plays a huge role in the resolution of the story.
Yes.
It doesn't, the resolution doesn't exist without that.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And that when the story was actually conceived, that was sort of always part of it, was this idea of choice and possibilities. That was sort of like the two main philosophical themes that I wanted to put in there.
Mm-hmm. As with all, good characters have flaws.
Sure.
And we've got Ethan right up front here. Ethan, what is his last name?
Cross.
There we go. It's a good name. Yeah. I like it. So you've got Ethan here. His I'd say biggest character flaw we're introduced to pretty soon, and it occurred to me as I'm reading, it's like, okay, this flaw in the way that he handled the situation, that could make you hate him. It could make someone go like, this son of a bit, what the And how did you approach that with like did that occur to you? It's like, how do I make this guy sympathetic at the same time he did deal with something very poorly?
Yeah, and I said exactly right. He's a human being. So, and he was, clearly he was deeply in love with Maria, and the loss of her, because I looked at it, looking at people in my own life who had those kind of losses, not everybody handles them correctly. And when you have a man who can be obsessed with science in some ways, and that's his escape just in normal life, it was a perfect way to have him crack after that. And it was an unfortunate way for Sophie, but it was necessary. Their lives at the very beginning, how they both handled that and what happened with Sophie was instrumental in closing it out the way it did. Mm-hmm. Maria's death was, I think, was a requirement in this story. And it's one of those things that's sort of like the old Star Trek episode, City on the Edge of Forever, where you just have to have, you hate it, but it's just a necessary thing to have happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think you had mentioned this earlier, but the task of making someone who is dead, particularly a dead mother,
Right.
which we do see in we do see that thing. But to say what's the element of empowerment to that character versus feeling like we're fridging that character, I don't know if that went into.
No, and I think in my case, I wanted to. I kind of wanted to close the loop and basically allow them. This was sort of my, I guess, compassionate moment where I wanted to bring both of them to have that ability to interact in some way to get some closure.
Yeah. It was. I never felt like Maria's death was done as is a trap, right? Is like, oh, someone dies, particularly women characters, just to motivate the protagonist, typically male protagonists, to be like, this dead person gives me a. But I didn't really feel. In fact, if anything, the grief was paralytic, and that she had to be, through memory and other, the dynamics that you used to empower her character. She didn't seem weak to me ever, really.
No.
Yeah.
No, she is not. Absolutely not.
I also, it was interesting to me the way, even just in the prologue, the Ethan's flaws and the estrangement that he, caused, with his daughter, we'd say that he's the primary at fault for it. It was interesting to me. It was told through the eyes of a good friend who tried to help and had empathy for him. And it made me want to have empathy for him as well, in a way. Right.
Yeah. I kind of set the stage. And then of course, when you see Ethan at the very beginning, that first chapter, what he's doing and what he faces, it kind of builds even a little bit more empathy for him. Here's a broken man, a broken career, on so many levels. And he's just absolutely at rock bottom pretty much.
Another quote, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'd be surprised if you did. If you were like, why are you quoting my book?
That's right.
So I don't know why I was saying that. Anyway, it's a quote from Sophie, and I wonder how you feel like this applies to our world now. She says, we don't need blind loyalty. We need warriors, thinkers, protectors. We need all of you. And it hit me. It's like all of you could encompass people, and it could encompass the individual too.
Sure.
But I'm curious, what do you think? Do you feel like that's something we need just in general, or are there specific thoughts about, what we need now?
I think when you're talking about people who are engaged at that meta level of life, that those three things are great, and they provide a nice triangle balancing aspect, and they're, so if I was gonna have a secret society, I would like that secret society to have those kind of three-pronged approaches in their members. And so that's kind of what it meant. It didn't really mean that for the overall, population, but for those who are there to stand tall and do something for us that we're not even aware of, yes, we want that there. Mm-hmm. We want those three pieces there.
It's another recollection that my brain is associating here is what I believe is an underappreciated movie, which was Disney's Tomorrowland. A lot of people didn't notice that came out, but and I feel like nobody talks about it. But that's the thrust of the whole thing, is that we're going to save the world through smart, dynamic people who aren't afraid to stand up for both what they believe in and what is a real problem solving instead of knee-jerk reactions.
Right. Which is the warrior aspect of it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing, is like you can interpret, right, a warrior, you think of somebody who's just kicking ass, and certainly, we got some characters here who are comfortable,
doing that, yes,
beating the bad guy's ass. But at the same time, like I said, that doesn't do it. This isn't that type of a story, right? It's like we're going to do it through being the kind of warrior who stands up for what's right and tries to, what would you say, trust people?
Trust people,
yeah. But yet at the same way, not just a trust of like, just whatever, and everybody will be fine. There's a balance even to that, I feel like. The idea of
that protector aspect that comes in.
Right.
So it's the father, the sage, you want to give as much as you can, but you also know that if you have kids running around, let them run to a point. because if they get close to the road, you gotta pull them back.
Yeah. And also another thing I think is great is that when a story reminds me of a bunch of different things, but yet is its own story, that once again, probably a hard balance to say, here's these elements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I said, 5 revisions. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Well, it shows, you're putting that effort that's in there. I have a curiosity too about, obviously, like you said, there was always an interest in Edgar Cayce, who I think is, by the way, fascinating person in of himself. What other things do you think directed you towards? Here's the stories and the mystical elements, like why Egypt, and what do you think speaks to you about some of the things you chose?
Well, Cayce said the Hall of Records was located beneath the Sphinx, so that's kind of why I picked Egypt.
Oh, right. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, that was that. So, but other aspects like the secret societies, I mean, I've studied and learned about them over the years, and been part of a couple of them, and so you kind of get to see what some of those are like, and some of them, none of them were quite as cool as the ones I created in the book, but there was some. They're just these things that exist out there that people. I wanted to put some of that stuff in there, but instead of having them separate, standalone, places, I wanted to bring them all together into a whirlwind of a story that, okay, this became a big deal. This is something that everybody's going to pay attention to because it was a big deal to define the Hall of Records. That changes everything.
Yeah. So you just said something intriguing, and you can tell me to, you can tell me, but you'll have to kill me. No, when you said that you've had some experience then hands-on with
Yep.
interacting with, is there anything you can say about that? Is there?
I mean, we're not talking about anything like that's not known. There's a couple that are not well known, but I've been part of the Masonic Order, the Rosicrucian Order over the years, and so you get to understand what motivates them and why they do what they do, and the history. I love history. Mm-hmm. So it's like, when I join these things, I look right at the history and where they came from and how they developed and who was in charge when they first started out. That could tell you so much about who they are now just by knowing where they came from. Mm-hmm. And, those things were kind of built into, because even the Guardians and the Collective have a history in that story, in that novel, that I didn't cover as in depth yet. It'll come over time as other things unfold, but they are all there for, there's a deep, long history for those two organizations.
That's it. That's exciting. I look forward to learning more about that. I love when there's lore that isn't stated. Like, I don't know why, there's just a feel for like, oh, I think that there's some ideas here that are just not being said. Once again, I like it because it's representative of life, where it's like there's more to tell than we hear. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to unfold it slowly. And I'll be honest with you, I have more pages written on the lore than I did in that novel, but by far. So there's a lot of stuff I haven't even touched yet. And I've got 3 novels in this series. There's another series that's 3 novels. And then there's a capstone series that's going to kind of be 3 novels. And all of that lore is going to be shared amongst all of it. So it's going to be unfolding in little by little.
Well, are we going to see, once again, tell me to shut up if I'm asking too much, but I'm curious. You had mentioned that it's going to be other characters and people that exist within this world. Yep. Are we going to see Ethan and Sophie again?
Yes, you are. Oh. And the next novel is called Echoes of Atlantis, and it's going to be out probably end of October-ish is what I'm thinking, maybe November. Mm-hmm. But it's the sequel and continuation. It's the way I left it, is I left it in a kind of semi-open state, but so I picked up the ball and ran with it.
Yeah, that's what, and I read it. I was like, whether this is standalone or certainly open for more stories. Right. I was like, there's a part of me that's like, I either want to know or think about, what do these people do next?
Yes.
Because you both encapsulate, this adventure is done, but there's a whole new chapter that it's opening up that is fascinating to think about. How would you do that? I'll say, to be vague,
Let's just say that this is the reason why I've written 300 plus pages of Lord.
Right.
So like, and I even written a novella that actually, people, I write these short stories on my website, and I mention it to folks that are on my list, but they don't really bother. But these are all lenses into my universe, and they'll give you hints, they'll give you ideas. You can kind of speculate on some things, but yeah, the second novel is bigger than the first, like 20% bigger. And it's going to really open up a whole bunch of new things. And people might think it has a little bit of the Empire Strikes Back feel to it, but it's not meant for that. It's just expanding things out so that other things now can kind of come into play.
Yeah, well, and that's something that I really want to give people a chance to learn here of how they, not only sort of, stock Goodreads or whatever, although maybe that's one of the landing points, but places people can follow your work and can kind of keep on top of where these things are happening. Now, before we launch into that, specifics of where to find you, I always like to ask everybody who comes on if they have any recommendations for people out there. And you obviously have a lot of, I think, passion about society and about people. Are there things that you would recommend to say, here's some good ways to give back to the community?
Yeah, I love animal rescue of all types. I have, experience with that, and I've kind of seen it firsthand. So I don't have any specific organizations, but especially a lot of the local organizations in your area that are serving your area specifically, any help you can give those I'd be very appreciative, I'm sure.
There's a lot of powerful things that are done with that. I know in my local area, I'm aware of some, you have shelters. There's obviously the ones that are either no kill or try to be.
Right.
And that's always great. There, we have a shelter around here that actually works with local domestic violence shelters because people may not think about this, but sometimes people won't leave a dangerous relationship because they're worried about what will happen to their dog. And a shelter where they can go, even, we'll take them and their kids, but they're not set up to take animals.
Right.
And so,
that's a great idea.
Yeah. A local shelter. It's like, bring your dog here and then you can come visit the dog and it'll be safe.
Yeah.
And, anyway, or I think they do cats too, but
that's great. I like that idea. Yeah.
I don't know if they do any other animals, but bring your ferret. I don't know. Anyway, hopefully they can help with that. So, well, where do people find you? Is there a good?
It's really simple. BillCombs.com.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. And all my socials are linked there, and you can join my distribution list. I'll send you a novella just for joining. Nice. And that will give you but all the short stories are there. They don't cost anything. Just I post them when I get inspired, and you can read them whenever they come out.
I love that, by the way, when people do that as well. Yeah, just that sharing of like, oh, here's some things that you can just kind of get into. I don't know. I think it's very cool.
Yeah. Well, I actually wrote, I don't know if you might have read it, but I actually wrote a lost chapter from the Quantum Gate called The Night Maria Died.
Yeah.
If you want it, let me know and I'll send it to you.
I do. Yeah, definitely. I'll have to email you. I've got your email in the scheduling software. Now I can be obnoxious more effectively. Well, I'll be obnoxious more effectively. I find that at a certain level anyway. Is that one that's good to read after you already know more about how she died through the novel?
It's actually better to read. I mean, I could have inserted it, but it wouldn't have made as much sense. It's much better to read it after the novel. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, good to know. And that's everybody go to BillCombs.com to learn more about that and to follow it. I love the interactive type of thing that you're describing, because I think it shows a love for the storytelling as well as just here's my book, kind of thing.
Yeah, I love storytelling. Yeah. That's kind of my. The writing part is okay, but the storytelling is really cool. Yes. That's what I love. Yeah.
Yeah, many people feel like the writing's the most can be the arduous part of how to get the story out of your head. Right? But there's obviously a lot of love in that as well. Well, before we wrap up today, I want to take a moment to mention to everybody the The Broken Brain, of course, highlights a different local charity to a local area, a nonprofit or a charity doing what we find to be good work. And I endeavor to always try to check out the charity scores online and things and what they're doing. So this month we're highlighting an NGO that operates in India called the Akshaya Patra. And what they do is they work to provide a hot midday meal for children who come to school. There's a lot of children who struggle with getting to school and have a lot of, especially in poverty, obviously. And so a midday meal serves as an incentive to come to school, as well as giving them some nutrients and nourishment they might not otherwise get, which of course we know contributes to cognitive health and the ability to do that. So if people go to akshayapatra.org, you can see the spelling of that in the show notes, or it's also AKSHAYAPATRA. If everybody got that, hit the 10-second backward button if you didn't, or just look at the show notes as well. And for anybody who is considering supporting The Broken Brain, all of our Patreon members, when you join, 50% of your donation will go towards the highlighted charity in the month in which you join, and will continue each month. 50% will go to that charity for the duration of your membership, as well as the helping the Broken Brain to do things, and also getting fun bonus materials, at least as fun as we can. Also, if anybody, if you're listening and you hear a charity that comes up in another month that you're interested, just, you can message me through the Patreon, or reach out at dwighthurst@gmail.com and let me know, and I'll switch I can switch your donation around too. If y'all want that, just let me know. So, Bill, thank you so much for taking the time, not just to be here today, but for writing this story. It's great. It made a difference for me, and I'm sure it will for a lot of people.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time with you. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you for listening to the Court and Parts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court and Parts shows, visit courtandarts.com.